Hello, everyone. Welcome to another brief lecture for our Phil 115 critical thinking material. This is chapter 6, evidence and experts. And I think this is an incredibly important set of topics that we're about to get into, starting with chapter 6. It's not that the previous chapters haven't been useful. I think they certainly have, but there is so much that is changing in our society in terms of how we get our information, the spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories, and all kinds of other issues with online communication in particular, that it's really important for us as critical thinkers to talk about some general points about evidence and experts, especially in American culture and society, where I think it's safe to say we have a skepticism about evidence and experts. And certainly this comes up in very real situations, whether it's anti-vaccination efforts, whether it's, as I said, conspiracy theories or claims about election fraud. It's really crucial, I think, that we talk about evidence and experts, at least generally, so that hopefully we can be better critical thinkers ourselves. Okay, so as I mentioned just a few moments ago, we obviously live in a time where information is readily available. I don't want to date myself or reveal my age, but certainly this has changed quite stunningly in my own lifetime. I still remember when cell phones weren't really as big of a thing. I know that that makes me probably sound very old, but when we didn't have smartphones, I remember that, right? So, I mean, things have changed very rapidly, and it's safe to say that, now that we have computers in our hands and we can look anything up, and with social media, information is readily available. It doesn't mean it's good information, but it's obvious that we're bombarded with all kinds of demands for our time, right, and our attention. But yeah, I think it's safe to say it's a two-edged sword. I mean, as I mentioned, the information that we do have access to isn't necessarily always reliable, right? And if we're talking about experts, I mean, I think you've probably noticed this too. A lot of people online love to claim that they're an expert on anything, whether it's politics or religion or you name it. There are lots of people online who claim to be experts. YouTube, I think, is a good example. But if we're being intellectually modest, no one should presume to be an expert on everything, right? Even the smartest people in the world, or the people with the most degrees, aren't experts on everything, right? There's a lot of stuff that we don't know, and anyone who claims to know everything, right, should be met with a healthy dose of skepticism. Obviously, though, we rely on information relayed to us from other sources for so many different reasons, right? Whether it's going to the dentist or going for a checkup or getting COVID-19 vaccine, right? There's so many reasons that we rely on other people for information. I think a good example that's mentioned in the text is auto mechanics, right? I mean, there's a few things that I can do when it comes to cars, but certainly not anywhere near the level of expertise that an auto mechanic has, right? So I rely on the information that they tell me when I take it in to get serviced, right? So we rely on information from others, whether we realize it or not. And to be a good critical thinker involves admitting that we're epistemically fallible, which just means that we are prone to error. We're not infallible, right? We do make mistakes, and that we should admit that, right? We don't know everything, and it's okay to rely on information from other people. But to be a good critical thinker means to think critically about the sources of the information that we get and what we do with the information once we get it. Okay, so the book mentions a few kind of general things that I'll highlight here. One thing is background information. This is the huge collection of very well supported beliefs that we all rely on to inform our actions and choices. I mean, these are things like basic facts about everyday things, beliefs based on very good evidence, including perhaps personal observations and the statements of excellent authorities, strongly justified claims that we would regard as perhaps common sense or common knowledge, though we have to be careful with that. So what are some examples? I think we all have some well-supported beliefs that we can't just eat sugar all day, every day, right? That I can't eat an entire pizza without becoming ill, or that I shouldn't eat Tide Pods, right? These are things that we would hope most people would know, that it's not safe to drink bleach, right? Things like that, that we think most of us have a good understanding of. But obviously claims are going to conflict, and this doesn't stop people from doing all kinds of things, right? So the book has, I think, a couple, they're not foolproof, but I think they're good rules of thumb that are worth taking out of the chapter. One is, if a claim conflicts with other claims we have good reason to accept, we have good grounds for doubting it. So for example, some people think that fluoride in municipal drinking water is a mind control substance. That is a view that some people hold in the United States in particular. Obviously, this claim conflicts with other things that we have good reasons to accept, right? That, for example, the city or the state has really no interest in controlling our minds, or really even having the capacity to do that. We also know some background stuff about fluoride, right? If we just did a little bit of digging, we know that it's not a mind control substance based on our understanding of chemistry, right? So we have good reason to doubt this claim. Similarly, if a claim conflicts with our background information, like the stuff we just mentioned, then we have good reason to doubt it. We're not saying dismiss it out of hand, but we have good reason to doubt it. So here's a good example. Wearing your favorite team's colors will cause them to win their next game. I mean, is there really any reason to think that if we wear a team's jersey, they're going to win? No, right? I mean, all things considered, it has no effect on how well the team's going to perform. Okay, so, there's a lot of philosophy here that we would need to unpack. We'll try to leave it on the simpler side, but one thing that often gets debated and, I should say misused, especially online, is this distinction between facts and opinions. Because I think people, especially online, interchange the two, right? Where they treat facts like opinions and opinions like facts. And we really, really want to be careful here. Generally, a fact, I'm not sure this definition is the best, but for our purposes, it'll work. A fact is generally thought of as a proposition or statement that is known or proved to be true. So what's a fact? I don't know what's a good candidate. Olympia is the capital of Washington State. Could that change? Yeah, but it seems like that's a proposition, it's a claim, and we know it to be true. Now, could it be the case that Olympia is not the capital? Yeah, but I think we have no good grounds to doubt that, right? Now, one thing that, where somebody could come in and say, well, Seattle's the capital of Washington. Well, and let's say they say, that's my opinion. Well, that could be your opinion, but right, this is where this distinction between facts and opinions would really come in handy, because certainly people can be of the opinion that Seattle is the capital of Washington, but we don't want to say that their opinions are facts, right? So an opinion is perhaps best thought of as a view or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on any facts or knowledge. So here's an opinion that I hold. I think watching golf on television is extremely boring. I'm not a big sports person generally, but golf in particular just seems really boring to watch on television. Now, I know a lot of people who enjoy watching golf on television. That's great, right? That's their taste. So like food, like other things, opinions come in varieties and in degrees, right? So a lot of people like watching golf on television. That's okay. Now, if I wanted to say that golf on television is boring as a fact, then I think I would be misusing fact, right? That's really just my opinion. That's my view about something, right? So I don't want to confuse something like this with something like this, right? And I think our online discussions would be better served if we stopped conflating facts and opinions, right? So that's why I mentioned this here. When people say things like, that's a matter of opinion, well, that can sometimes mean opinions differ, which of course we know is trivially true. So thinking of food, um, you know, I like Thai food. Thai food is incredible, I think, but I know people who don't like it, right? That's their opinion. That's fine. That's their judgment. They don't like the taste. Maybe they don't like the spice. Great. Is it a fact that Thai food is disgusting? No, right? Or that Thai food is great? I mean, I think it is, but again, that's my opinion. So I really think it's crucial that when we have discussions with other people, we're not playing fast and loose with the distinction between facts and opinions, right? Yeah, opinions are subjective. Okay, so I was thinking of this famous quote that I have always appreciated. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts. So, right, we can have opinions about Thai food or whether golf is boring or, things like that. But if I start claiming that Seattle is the capital of Washington, that's my fact. Well, that could be my opinion, but that doesn't mean that that's my own fact, right? I'm just mistaken, right? I think most all of us want to say some people are just mistaken about things, and that's okay. We're all mistaken about things at various points in our lives. But if we no longer are talking about the same reality or the same shared sense of community, then as I think we're seeing in at least American society, we get real problems, right? And I don't think social media and the internet really makes that easier for us, right? When we got people living in what seems like different realities, we can have real problems. So I'm always reminded of this quote, and I still think it's useful. Okay, so a couple other things that are mentioned about beliefs and evidence. So a couple of examples. It's not reasonable to believe a claim when there is no good reason for doing so. I mean, typically we want to proportion our belief to evidence, right? So here are two videos. I'm not going to play them. This is somebody claiming that prayer alone prevents the flu and that they don't need a flu vaccine. And then this is a story about rock crystals. Specifically the claim that placing certain crystals under your pillowcase helps you sleep better. So that's a claim that isn't backed up by empirical evidence. So instead, I mean, if we want to be good critical thinkers, we should be evidentialists, which is just the view that beliefs should be proportioned to the evidence in their favor, right? So if we have good reasons for thinking that these claims or claims like these are dubious, then we shouldn't believe them, right? And sometimes, as we've seen, unfortunately, believing in claims when there's not good evidence for it can be really destructive and can lead to serious consequences, whether it's, as I mentioned, getting vaccines, right? Or believing in believing that the elections are rigged, right? Those have serious consequences. So I think it's really important that we try to be as good a critical thinker as we can be. And how do we do that? Well, I think we should start by proportioning our beliefs to the evidence. If things don't have evidence to support them, empirical or otherwise, we shouldn't believe them, right? It's really that simple. And I know that we live in a very divided time, but I mean, we got to start somewhere here. And we shouldn't believe in unreasonable claims when there's not good reason for doing so, right? Yeah, I strongly believe in evidentialism as a general rule of life, at least for myself. I've found that that's how I'm able to decipher lots of different claims, especially online and through social media. Right. So one thing that follows, the more evidence a claim has in its favor, the stronger our belief in it should be. Of course, that's open to change and revision. Right. So here's something that we have learned about over time, right? Prolonged exposure to asbestos can lead to serious health repercussions. So if you don't know what this is something that is put in building materials and insulation, or it used to be in your home. So it does cause serious health repercussions. So we have a lot of evidence in favor of that claim. whereas weak evidence for a claim warrants weak belief, right? Strong evidence warrants strong belief. So this is not a good claim, right? Consuming Tide Pods orally is safe since 37 other people have already done it, right? There's no good evidence to believe that, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about experts. So the book does, I think, a pretty good job of talking about what makes an expert an expert. They're not hard and fast rules per se, but I think they're good general guidelines. An expert is someone who is more knowledgeable in a particular subject area or field than most others are. So what's a good example of an expert? Well, my pharmacist, right? They got certified, they went to school, they have the training, they're able to decipher things that I am not, right? You don't want me behind the counter mixing pills. They're an expert. My pharmacist is an expert. Do pharmacists make mistakes? Absolutely. Doctors make mistakes, surgeons make mistakes, firefighters, police officers, right? Teachers, we all make mistakes, even if we're experts. But we live in a time when people just don't accept expert opinion about a whole number of things, not just medical information, but experts on things like foreign policy or financial matters, right? Economists, things like that. And we have to remind ourselves that experts are more likely not universally right, but they're more likely to be right because, one, they have access to more information on the subject than we do. So certainly my pharmacist has a lot more information on medications than I ever would, right? And they're better at judging that information than we are. So whether we're talking about medicine or, take x-rays, you don't want me looking at x-rays. I'm not trained in that. Maybe you are, but I certainly don't have any training in how to read x-ray scans. Or take the car example, right? If I take my car in to the shop, they know what to look for, right? They know what goes where and how it works to a degree far better than I would, right? So I rely on them. Do mechanics make mistakes? Absolutely. But I think these two things are still true. Right. So again, if a claim conflicts with expert opinion, we have good reason to doubt it. So both of these claims conflict with expert opinion. Fluoride is harmful, not true. And anthropogenic climate change isn't real. So there's another good example. A lot of people think that humans have no influence on the climate. We know overwhelmingly that that's not the case, right? Are there climate deniers? Sure. But there is a near universal consensus. I say near, not everyone, but a near universal consensus that humans are driving temperature increases across the globe based on how much carbon we emit and among other things. Obviously, experts can disagree about a claim. And in those cases, yeah, we have good reason to doubt it or at least withhold assent. So I think a good example would be things like in physics. There's a discussion about what the ultimate structure of the universe is. So you've got some people who think it's composed of tiny strings. Some people think we're living in a multiverse or perhaps a computer simulation. And in those cases, I would say, yeah, we don't have all the information and there's still a lot of theoretical physics that needs to be done. And maybe it's best to just hold off, right? Or maybe another good example would be extraterrestrial organisms, right? For me, I've read a lot of stories about it and firsthand accounts. For me, the evidence just isn't strong there, right? So I'm going to withhold judgment on that for myself. But I think when experts do disagree, when there is a lot of disagreement, there's nothing wrong with holding off, right? Holding off assent to the claim in question. Right? Are experts infallible? Of course not, but this fact is not reason enough to dismiss the authority of all experts or to never trust them in the first place. So one example of something that is very much related to the internet is the fallacious appeal to authority. And this is, as I'm sure you can imagine, people online or anywhere claiming to be an authority on something when they're not. So this is Mike Hughes. He is a flat earther, believes the earth is flat. He developed this rocket. And right, that this would be a good example of relying on someone whose opinion claims to be expert, but in fact is not an expert, right? He's not an astronomer, doesn't have a PhD in astrobiology, or didn't train at NASA, right? Things that we would normally associate with an expert on space. And also we should point out that just because you're an expert in one field does not qualify them to be an expert in another field. So to take me as an example, I mean, I don't know if I'm an expert in philosophy, but I think I know a decent amount about it. I certainly am not an expert in lots of things, right? Even if have expertise in one field, doesn't mean I'm an expert in all fields. So this is a clip from an old show, actually, on Comedy Central. It's with the author that's mentioned in the textbook, Tom Nichols, whose writing is featured in the text. So I could even post that if you're interested. But I show that in my face-to-face classes. So a couple other points. One, it's reasonable to accept the evidence provided by personal experience only if there's no good reason to doubt it. But there are factors that give us good reason to doubt the reliability of personal experience, whether it's impairment, expectation, and numeracy. So we'll take each of those in turn. So impairment, I mean, this should be obvious. If our perceptual faculties are impaired, they're much less reliable. And impairment can take on different forms, right? Distractions, we're very easily distracted as a species. Injury or illness, being incapacitated somehow. I mean, there's lots of ways that our perceptual faculties can be impaired, and we often will jump to conclusions. We claim to have seen something when maybe we didn't. Psychology has a lot of interesting things to say about this, right? If any of these factors are at play, the chances of misperception are higher. Okay, expectation. This is a crucial one. We often perceive what we want or expect to perceive. In other words, the mere suggestion that something is present will cause individuals to think that it's present. So in other words, when we expect certain things to happen, we will see it happen, right? It's called expectancy error, right? Or expectancy bias. There's another name for it. It's pareidolia. And there's a lot of really interesting examples of this online if you want to Google this term. Lots of ways where, if people expect, for instance, to see Jesus in their toast, they're going to see Jesus in their toast, right? Even though, there's not any good reason to think that that's Jesus in the toast, right? So expectation can take on so many different forms, right? Thinking that something is present when it isn't because you expect it to be there, reading something into a situation based on a past experience, thinking someone called out your name when they didn't, right? Maybe you've just gotten used to it. There are so many other examples. I wish we could talk about this, but as critical thinkers, the point is we need to minimize expectation bias as much as possible. So another common bias that we have is in numeracy. We're also really bad at judging probabilities, especially a priori. So with things like birthdays, gambling, we're really bad at calculating on the whole what the a priori probabilities are. So I think I've already mentioned the gambler's fallacy in one of the other lectures. Another good example would be the Monty Hall problem. If you're interested in that, you can just Google Monty Hall problem. It's from a game show from a couple years ago or something like that. So we're really bad at calculating a priori probabilities. And this is called a numeracy bias. And this can take on a couple different forms. As I mentioned, the gambler's fallacy, confirmation bias, which we mentioned in the first few chapters, hasty generalizations, and other probabilistic paradoxes, which there are many. But as critical thinkers, we should be aware of how innumeracy bias can affect our judgments, especially about probabilities. Okay, so we'll say more about advertising going forward, since we have a chapter on advertising in the second edition now, which is great. But advertising, I think it's safe to say, we have generally good reason to doubt the claims of advertisers, right? Because what are they trying to do? They're trying to get us to purchase their products. And this example is it's always a good example for me. You know, things like Coca-Cola and soda in general. I mean, there were claims, there were all kinds of claims about what it could do, not just relieving headaches or mental exhaustion, but also, yeah, despondent when ladies are thirsty and despondent, to also claiming to have sexual ramifications. So, I mean, there's just so many examples from history of advertisers making dubious claims about their products and what they can do. But we'll save that for a future chapter. Obviously, we need to be aware that the purpose of advertising is to sell or promote something, and it's safe to say advertising has a reputation for and history of misleading messages, to say the least, right? And ads often use language that can be very misleading, like up to 70% off, right? Or starting at this price, as many as, virtually, right? Things like that. These are called Weaslers that ads often use in their language. So we want to be on the lookout for that. Okay, so hard truth about all media. I mean, not everything you read is true, obviously. Countless sources on the internet and in conventional media are unreliable. I think that's also safe to say. It's often difficult to tell the difference between fake or false news and real news. So we'll talk about that in another chapter. Advertising cannot be trusted to give you unbiased information. Doesn't mean everything that's on TV is false, but it should be met with a healthy dose of skepticism. And a lot of what we read online is speculative, misleading, vicious, self-serving, and especially false. So I'm sure we all know that, but sometimes it's good to remind ourselves. Evaluating sources, right? We want to read critically. It doesn't mean that we have to just deny everything that other people say, but we can be critical. There's a healthy sense of skepticism and critical thinking that is appropriate, right? When other people try to relay information, right? We want to figure out the source. We want to ask, are they an expert in this field? What are their credentials? Is this person known to be a generally reliable source? I like one of the recommendations in the chapter. I mean, obviously education and training from reputable institutions in a relevant field is important, but also reputation among peers, right? I mean, so if we're looking for good journalists or good professors of philosophy or scientists, whatever, what do their peers think of them, right? I mean, generally well-respected, if we're talking about philosophers, they're respected in the field. Everybody knows who they are. They have publications. They give talks at prestigious universities. I mean, they're highly regarded in the field. And those are, you know, same could be said for mechanics, right? Are they generally reliable? Are they, right? Do they have other professional accomplishments? It's sometimes hard to ascertain that, but usually it's pretty easy, right? To figure out if somebody has the requisite training. But the problem is online, a lot of people claim to be experts and they're not, right? So we want to be critical. We want to size up authors, bloggers, publishers, but do so respectfully, right? And we want to sort out and evaluate claims, compare sources, try to discern the source's purpose, and look for a variety of news sources, right? And even experts, right? That's why we often say get a second opinion. When we take our car in, right? Maybe you take your car in to one shop and they quote you some really high price, and then you take it to another shop and they quote you a much lower price, right? That's obviously okay. So let me leave it there. Kind of gone on a little bit longer than I wanted, but if you have any questions, let me know. And thanks as always for listening.